Welcome to another episode of Peers Over Beers, your favorite digital and social evangelist podcast with your industry veteran hosts, Chris Detzel. This podcast starts now.
Welcome to another Peers Over Beers. My name is Chris Detzel, and we're going to live on the wilder side today. We have special guest Scott Wilder here on Peers Over Beers. Hey, Scott.
Hey there. Thanks for having me today. I hope it's okay that I'm gluten-free and don't always drink, most of the beers that are offered to me. But
You did say most, so that just means you do drink some beers every now and then.
I do. There's some gluten-free beers, and then every once in a while when nobody's looking, I will drink a beer that does have gluten in it. But I'm supposed to be gluten-free.
Well, you do the best you can, and it's okay to probably cheat a little bit every now and then. It's good to know that is there a specific gluten-free beer you like?
I'll just take whatever they give me. Yeah.
If you just say gluten-free, you got it, just put it in it.
Yeah, I prefer sense. More of the clear drinks like sake, vodka.
Mm-hmm.
So
you like the hard
have
stuff.
Those.
Okay. Yeah, well, those aren't bad either. I've been collecting a little bit of scotch, and for my birthday, my wife got me it's the Blue Label. What is it called? Leah, what was it? She's right there. No, she can't hear me. But anyways, but I've been collecting some scotch, and it's been really good. So, well, hey, we can't talk about beer and or scotch or even the white or the clear stuff that you like, but we want to talk a little bit about community today. But Scott, if you don't know him, he's like the master of all things communities. He's been there, done that, and has done this job and led communities for a really long time. As a matter of fact, he and I were talking probably Scott, like 3 weeks ago, and
yep.
You mentioned, and I was talking to him about, at one point in my career, probably about a year ago, somebody came up to me and said, "Chris, is community the only thing that you want to do?" He said, it's a good role and it's good. I'm sure it does well for you, but is there something that you might want to think of in the future? I was like, yeah, maybe. I don't know. And so I was talking to Scott about that, and Scott was mentioning that you did community stuff, and then you kind of went into the growth marketing and that kind of stuff. And I'm highly interested to learn more about that. You kind of moved your career from not community, but also into growth marketing. What was that like?
Yeah, and I'm more than happy to give more about my background. But yeah. I think I was
sorry.
We can go down that. We can We can go down that path if you want. But I think it's really important to. There's nothing wrong with like focusing 100% on one discipline.
Yeah.
But I think even though this is the time right now, and kind of internet history for community, I think there's still some limitations in terms of large companies and budgets they put in there. And I realized that early on. I'd worked at Intuit for many years, and then I did community at Google, and I got to Marketo. And Marketo is definitely stepping up and putting money into the community. Anybody who's been in that space knows about the Marketing Nation. And so we really built out a very successful community there. But I also decided at that point that I needed another power. I don't know if it's a superpower or not, but I needed another skill set. And so since I was at Marketo and I was learning Salesforce, et cetera, I decided to lean into growth marketing. And so I'm a big baseball fan. So as Yogi Berra says, when there's a fork in the road, take it. And so I took both paths of community and growth marketing and really focused on trying to be the best growth marketer, growth product person I could be. There was also a book that came out a few years before that. And so I did both there. And then after I left Marketo, I'm still doing some community stuff, but I leaned in even more into the growth marketing at Adobe. And I can talk a little bit about some of the learnings there, and Coursera and Udacity. I still did some stuff in community, but then when I went to HubSpot, then I went back into community as kind of like my primary focus. And I can talk a little bit about what I wanted to do there. There's something called the T-shaped marketer. And the T-shaped marketer says, horizontally like a T, there's certain marketing skills you need to acquire for your career, right? You need to understand data, you need to understand positioning and branding. But it also says from a vertical aspect that there's 2 or 3 areas that you should really focus on. And so again, at that point in my career, I really decided to focus on growth marketing and continue with community.
Do you see? So we'll get back to kind of, and by the way, great job of bringing that into your career. That was awesome, and kind of your past. And I always tell people I get off a little bit sometimes, and thank you for bringing it back already in the beginning. So when you kind of look at growth marketing in communities, do you see similarities and or places where they can kind of meet? I mean, I'm fascinated in kind of your thoughts there. I mean, because you went back to community from growth marketing.
Yeah, definitely. So I've always thought of, even when I did community early on, community is a product, right? So some people who are in community, they might have more of a kind of a product mindset. Some might have more of a kind of like, I'll call it like focused on the moderation and belonging and all that. And some might focus on data, or some might focus on integration. So I always had that product mindset. So it really was natural for me to think about product-led growth or marketing-led growth. And so some of the things I think are really key is growth marketing requires cross-functional work, right? So kind of the philosophy is small teams, growth squads move quickly. So I think that's one thing. The second thing would be kind of optimizing the journey, right? So looking at doing small experiments and tests, learning and optimizing further, which I think actually is something that most community managers I talk to don't focus on, right? This ability to constantly test. And you could be testing out a feature and an MVP focus. It could be testing out content, messaging, testing out a different onboarding path. And then the last thing or the next thing would be just being really data driven. And, we're all wrestling with ROI and all that. But like what metrics you look at, how do you constantly look in that kind of continuous improvement mindset, whether you're trying to focus on the ROI number, the engagement number, or even like the activation number.
I like that. Yeah, I think that, the data focus piece is, especially like, I'll give you some examples of my organization today is, we are a data company. But, we, like every other company, have a hard time kind of connecting business systems together, to talk to each other. When I think of, all the really rich and awesome data that you can get from community, not having those systems connected, like, could be Marketo or it could be a Salesforce or whatever, right? It's hard because, I'll give you an example. The other day I presented in front of the company the number of accounts that are in community that CSMs have, or that we have overall, right? I'll say we have 65% of our accounts in community has at least one user. And so getting that data was extremely difficult. But when I got that data and I showed that to the organization, our CEO, our CMO, our chief customer officer were all interested in, and you could do it by CSMs and things like that. So it's one. And then, that led to more work for me. Oh, well, we should do that for our partners and we should do that for whatever. But the way I had to get that information was very manual. But then people started coming to me, like this one guy was like, hey, I can help you get this automated and everything else. And so we'll see if that happens. But that, when people hear that the CEO is interested in this, this, and this, and they can help me do that, that's really awesome. And I think bringing that data to the forefront is the key in showing the value of that. I mean, that's just one small thing. It's like small. It took some effort, but just think what we can do now that, hey, X number of accounts are there. Then eventually we can start thinking about, when they engage in the community, how much does that influence revenue? How much does that influence, renewal rates and those kinds of things? We're not there yet, but those things are key. And presenting that information is very important.
That's awesome. It's great to hear you're on that journey and thinking that way, because I think, one of the big challenges, as you pointed out, is integrating these multiple systems. There's a few companies that are in the market now trying to address that issue. But I think it's, yeah, connecting your community to your CRM, connecting it to your, if you have an advocacy platform,
Mhm.
I think is really important. And then looking at it, if we're in the B2B space, so whether it's at the individual level or the account level, tying it to, you know, um, revenue growth, tying it to lifetime value, et cetera.
Yeah, but that's hard to do, right? But I think that's from so
Yeah, I
I
don't want to
think
make it sound like it's not a slam dunk, and you need lots of beers to figure out.
or clear alcohol. I do think, Scott, though, is as I kind of get into, usually my forte is building a community from scratch and then kind of scaling up. And what I've learned over the years is that when you go in there into an organization and you start from scratch, a lot of times the company is not ready for what you get to tell them about connecting to these business systems and everything else. But if you preach, or however you want to say it, evangelize the customer experience of, let's think about how a customer gets into your system. They go to docs, they go to get support, they go into to create an idea, they go into the community, they go into, if there's like 5 different logins, 6 different logins to do these things, and then there's no data to kind of, the data is all sporadic, and you can't get what you need from it. It's okay at first, but then you got to build a plan to get there. At least have it in your mind to say, well, we did this one thing. We connected enterprise search to some systems. So that's good. That's one step. Now customers can search anywhere and get any information on our stuff. And then, can we start looking at case reflection, that kind of stuff? And then you go on to the next thing. Is SSO next? Is law next? Then all of a sudden, 3 years, 5 years down the road, you have this really great buzzing, not just community, but self-help, digital self-help support kind of thing, if that's kind of your goal, right? We didn't talk about the marketing piece, but I think that comes, as well, depending on what type of community you have. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense, and I think it's a great approach to not try and to boil the whole ocean at once, and to,
Yeah.
you need some internal points on the board to show people, like, if you just, I mean, think about just connecting, the knowledge base experience with the community experience. Some platforms have it all in one, but they
Yeah.
might not. And then, if you start with a customer first, at HubSpot, we like to say, customer first versus function out is really key as well. And then, yeah, I think we talked about this once, is it kind of cracks me up that, most websites out there, if you look at the navigation bar, it's kind of resembles the org chart. And right, it's
Yeah.
like, service, support, marketing,
Mhm.
community. And I'm like, but that's not how, our customers are thinking. They don't think of, your company or my company as, in terms of different disciplines. So, but I like your approach. Yeah. Don't, start simple, get some points on the board, and then, build out over time.
And to shift this conversation a little, you mentioned that trends within community, and I'm not sure if this is exactly where you wanted to go, but over the last, look, community's been around for a long time, right? And you've been in this space for a really long time. I look at your LinkedIn, and it looks like what, 2001 at least, or maybe even before that. So um, as you see the last 2 years, and maybe it's COVID type related, I would love to kind of get your thoughts and views on, from, you've been doing community, what's changed in the last 2 or 3 years, if anything, to you? There's certainly a buzz, that's at the very least has changed. And then where do you kind of see community going in the future?
Yeah. I mean,
Not to
certainly.
put you on the spot, but I'm very
Oh, no,
interested to
that's
hear your
okay.
thoughts.
Yeah.
So
No, no. Um, yeah. So I think, obviously, we all know COVID has accelerated a lot of this stuff, and we know that there's more jobs out there. I think this, focus on data is a big one. And I, made a comment earlier that there's a number of companies in the space trying to think through about how to integrate your data, your community data, with other platforms.
mhm.
Two is, I think this whole integrated experience of, a lot of times when I talk about community, I try and elevate the conversation to either customer-led growth or community engagement. And what I mean by that is, again, what's that? What's that customer want to? What's the customer want to accomplish, right? And so they go to an engagement place where they might do some community. They might dabble in the knowledge base. They might go to the academy or whatever. So I think that's going to be a trend that accelerates. I think AI and automation is another big thing. And then, everybody now these days is talking about social tokens and NFTs
Yeah.
and things like that. So I think that is, another trend that's going to accelerate, at least in the B2B space. There's certainly B2C companies that are already doing some really interesting stuff. You can get an NFT of an inflatable Coca-Cola person. I don't know if you saw that, or you
I
get
didn't.
unique sneakers and things like that.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because you hear a lot about this Web 3.0 or Web 3 or however you want to. And I did a little bit of reading about it, and I still can't completely understand it. But and you can comment on this, but because you probably know more about it than I do. But from my understanding and what I read, I think it was yesterday or day before, is that today there's only a few companies that pretty much own the internet in a sense. It's Google's, the Facebooks, and places like that. Maybe it's Twitter's and how people are engaging in some ways, or at least kind of the big influencers. But over time that will change. We'll kind of have our own internet space, with all this stuff, with blockchain stuff, and I'm saying a lot of buzzwords, to be honest, and I don't completely understand them, but I do think it's going to be an important thing as we move forward, because when you start looking at kind of even Web 2.0 and social and everything else that took place, those were buzzwords then, right? Like when you think of now it's true when you big data and stuff like that. I remember those being big buzzwords, but then it became the real thing. I think Web3 is true and it's going to happen, but that exactly looks like we don't know. I don't know. I mean, we have some ideas, but what do you think? I mean, am I kind of on the right track-ish, or am I just way off and just saying bullshit?
Yeah, no, it's funny. Yeah, no, it's and it's funny what you said about buzzwords. Just to go off on a tangent for a second. So it was 1995, I think it was 96, and I was in a room at a company called GNN and Webcrawler. Webcrawler was the largest search engine then, and we were talking about how to create something called an internet ad, and we were talking about something that so people are going to go to the search web crawler, and we want to figure out how to create an ad. And we said, okay, well, maybe we can do an ad if somebody types in a certain word like New York, we'll show them an ad related to New York. And somebody said keyword. And at that point, it was maybe a handful of people were using the term keyword for search, and today everybody is, that's secondary. So, yeah. So, but getting back on track, I think how you're thinking is right. I think the main destinations of a search engine like Google, or, we can debate Facebook, they're running into some rough times, or, the Apple Store, I think those are still going to be there.
Yeah.
But you will find these communities that will be more decentralized. They're called DAOs, where the power to the people, and the people will manage them. But there's going to be a happy medium, because again, I mainly work in this B2B space, right? And so I don't think a company is going to turn over the key, give the keys of their car to their community. They might co-design it. There's a few out there. There's a handful that have been really leaning in terms of letting the community letting the people run the community. But I think there's still going to be, the companies are still going to be owning the community because they have liability and stuff like that. But you could find, communities that are just 100% owned by, the people, power to the people, a co-op of sorts.
Yeah, I guess when I think of that, it just kind of, I'm not computing exactly what that means. You know what I mean? I could start a community today and own it and have people come in, and just we all kind of do things, but I'm not sure what that means, to be honest. So it's probably a little, I don't know if it's over my head. I just maybe haven't done enough research on it, That makes
Yeah, I
sense.
would think about decision making. So how decision making is made, like you have a community and you're the grand poobah, and so you can make all the decisions, but you could open it up to 20 or 30 other people and make it a real kind of democracy of sorts. And if you're also selling tickets online or something, right, how do you share in the profits? And so that those are just some ways to think about it.
That isn't okay. That's super interesting. Yeah, this is really cool stuff because it's definitely going to be the future of some sort, and we don't. I mean, we have some ideas, I guess, but it'll be fun to see, fun to watch. Other things that I know you wanted to talk about today, but so I'll give you kind of the chance. Do you have any questions for me or
No,
thoughts?
I'm here to you talk about beers, clear alcohol, or anything you want.
Oh, I do love alcohol sometimes, but it's funny. I drink maybe once a week and might have a drink or two at the most. I just, I think I'm too old to really drink, a lot, and I don't drink too much, hardly ever. So if I do have one or two beers, I'm like to my wife, "Hey, do you want to drive?" So,
Yeah, don't drink and drive, and don't drink and tweet, or don't drink and text.
it's very good advice because I see myself sometimes grabbing the phone at a red light, and I'm like, you know what? Let's not do that. So, well, hey, I do kind of want to run something by you, just to it's a conversation that I had with uh, Donnie Weinstein the other day, last week on a Peers Over Beers, and yeah, I think you know him, and I want to know, like, because you've been doing this for a long time, and one thing that we have for Reltio's community is executive support in a big way. And, I've also had to where, at other companies to where I would have executive support, those executives leave, and then you've got to start rebuilding that back up. And it was extremely difficult. And at the end of the day, it pretty much didn't work. You know what I mean? Like, so just want to get your thoughts on, when you look at building communities, online B2B communities, what does that executive support look like to you, and how important is it?
I think it's really important because you're always trying to get resources.
Mm-hmm.
I think that also, I did hear that interview, and there's a lot of good advice there. I think, other things I would add is, if you're in a smaller company or the founder's really involved, I would really like getting the founder involved. And I can talk a little bit about my experience with Scott Cook at Intuit when we launched that community. And then I think also find the naysayers, the traditional naysayers. It could be corporate communications because they're worried about what you're saying. It could be legal. It could be privacy, right? You really want to partner with those folks as well. And then, obviously we're all dealing with, like we talked about earlier, the ROI issue. So if you're trying to figure out how you can tie it to ROI, even if it's inferred ROI, or even if it's part of a multi-attribution model. So those are just kind of three things: founder, the naysayers, and then multi-attribution or some sort of ROI.
Well, I definitely think if you can get the founder, CEO, those kind of people involved, and I agree. Having a great relationship with legal and security and communications could be really a key point. I don't really think of the communications piece because our communications person, she's all for community, and she's so it's hard for me to like, well, okay, but it's a really good point. And one of the things that I've done and always said, and you're kind of like saying not, I don't know if you're saying not to do it, but when there's people in the organization that just don't believe in community or whatever, my goal is not to convince them that community is going to work, because you can't really convince people necessarily that, hey, yeah, okay, you're right, Chris. I mean, it's really just going out and proving it, but then finding those people and spending your effort that with those executives that do care and getting that buy-in, and then over time you hope to get that other person's buy-in if that's really needed. I mean, I don't know that I waste that much time with the namesayers. Maybe it's not a waste. I mean, the departments you mentioned, you have to have legal and security buy-in. So I mean,
Yeah, I mean, they have to be part of the journey.
Yeah.
And so I think the more you can get them involved and in the kind of decision-making process and kind of bring them along, there's only one or two or three of you doing community, so you have to manage your time carefully.
You mentioned Intuit and having so a lot of our executives here at Reltio are from there, back probably more like 2010, 12 or something like that. But the culture and everything else they loved, and so tell me a little bit about that, kind of where community started there. And you mentioned that the CEO or founder there was into it, or he was literally into the community.
Yeah. So when I was there, so I was managing the e-commerce site, small business, QuickBooks.com. I was also managing digital marketing, and the business problem was that all the product managers and all the marketing people said, we want lots of content on the website, right? Everybody wants content. And, because of my age, I was influenced by this movie called Show Me the Money.
Yeah.
Jerry Maguire.
Yeah.
So I said, well, show me the money because I don't have the budget. And teams just wouldn't step forward and show me the money. So I talked to Elliot Ng, who I was reporting to then, and said, I've done a lot of community in the past. How about if we test out this community thing? I'll just fire up a server and, and see what I can do, and give me 6 months MVP, even though people weren't using that term then. And he's like, go for it. More or less overnight, we got lucky and the community took off big time. And so we kind of had proof of concept then. And, we had proof of concept, but then I needed some money to really scale it. We were really bootstrapping. I mean, basically it was kind of me and my little cube and my server and
doing your other job.
Doing my other job. So I actually tried to figure out, okay, how do we approach this? So I prepared a presentation to the C-level team and Scott Cook, the founder. I actually gave the presentation with legal, right? So at that time I was like, okay, who's going to because I was worried that legal would be really concerned based on some previous work I had done. And I went to talk to Scott Cook, and he was really big on something called, what he called then, user contribution systems. And so he was really trying to figure out how to leverage, the wisdom of the crowd and to create content. So he loved the idea. And then I presented at the C-level staff meeting. And Steve Bennett, who was the CEO, went around the room and he said, okay, so Scott wants this money. This is the vision. This is the plan. What do you guys think? And he asked each of his direct reports, and each one said yes, except for one. And one said, well, I'm concerned that this is going to, an employee is going to go in the community and say something negative. I think we've all run into that statement. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And his response was, you mean you hired somebody you're concerned about? And so that's when it really took off, and it really kind of evolved into something called live community, which is in TurboTax, where people can ask the community questions, into this whole ecosystem of pro advisor accountants who are, really customers of Intuit, who are helping others. So that was kind of the backstage, or the stage of the story of Intuit.
You founded that community?
Yes.
You're the founder. I did not know that. Wow. Keep going. Wow. I'm so wild here. I love it.
Take a walk on the wilder side. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't wait to keep talking. Keep going.
But when you talked about the Intuit culture, so one of the things that Intuit did I would say this was, I don't know if it was a silver bullet in making community successful, but it was maybe a bronze bullet. Was Intuit had a tremendous focus on building leaders in the company. Like they really operationalize how to create great leaders through like courses, through mentoring, through exercises. We all had ingrained in ourselves, ingrained in our heads these, they're kind of little mottos, little slogans, but they really meant a lot, like learn, teach, learn. So the best way to learn something is to teach it. And so
CEO says that all the time, and that is our motto: learn, teach, learn.
okay, so that's where they got it.
That's where they got it. They use that's awesome. You're just
Yeah.
oh
So
my God. It's the best conversation.
So I took
ever.
that. So I took that playbook though of leadership, and I actually used it to train our moderators, to train our power users in the community, to help them become leaders in their own, they're on their own platforms in their own worlds. And that was something that had a tremendous impact, right? All of a sudden, and I wish more of us community people would focus on this, is like, if you're a moderator or community manager, you need leadership skills. They might be more in the virtual world than in person, but that's definitely needed. And then if you're building out kind of your champions, and I'm into is also really big in co-design. So we talked about leadership and consumer-driven innovation, customer-driven innovation, sorry. And so, one of the things I took from that experience was working with customers to design your product and working with customers to make decisions. And I got a little flack at first, but I used to invite customers to my staff meetings and have them hear it, have the team hear it from the customers and have the customers make decisions with us. Kind of, maybe it was like we talked about Web3, maybe it was a little bit of Web3 back then.
Yeah.
But so in terms of culture, there was the leadership, there was the customer-driven design, there's other aspects as well. All that I leveraged for community, all that I've leveraged for growth, product-led growth, tremendous impact. I think that, as we think about our careers, and, I'd be interested in, how you would answer this is, which company really influenced, your professional DNA the most? And for me, it was Intuit.
Yeah, for me, well, there's two pieces to that question to me. There are two companies. One is Forrester Research. So I worked there for about 9.5 years. In my early 30s, maybe it was late 20s when I started. And, it was kind of the true business type of company that I get to work for, like before I was doing inside sales and stuff like that. But then I really started get to talk to leaders. George Colony is the CEO, Forrester Research, and just kind of his teachings and things like that. And it really kind of helped me to understand the business side of things. And I was, my job was more of a, sort of had to deal with community, but basically it's called an advisor. And what I would do is work with the leaders of enterprise architecture folks, connect them to peers, build agendas to get them to meet on site, case studies, all those kinds of things, get them in front of each other, basically, like Scotiabank and Taco Bell talking about their enterprise architecture practice, that kind of stuff. And just the people I met there. And I still have a good friend there in France that I go see every now and then. His name is Rakesh. And so, so that company was really, it was a huge, it was a big deal for me. And then the other piece, though, is after Forrester, I went to a company called Rexel. And Rexel, well, not right after, but kind of right after, this guy, and as a matter of fact, he was the founder also of Peers Over Beers, Michael Sandoval. But him and his boss, Devashish Saxena, so Devashish led an e-commerce team in a B2B company that was super old school, 70 years old, that's never done digital anything. And so they started e-commerce in like 10, 15 countries. and then we started social communities and live chat. Kind of when you think of like the social piece, communities, live chat, ratings and reviews, that was all under Michael and me. And then we had a developer, and we did some really cool things. But just the relationships that they built, the just focus that they had, and getting shit done was just amazing. And so for me, it was more of the relationships and what they taught me. Michael was an extremely patient teacher. I mean, I caught on fast-ish, but whenever it came to digital things, Forrester didn't teach me that. Michael and Devashish and the team he had around him taught me all those things that I just didn't know the language or understand it at all. Like SEO, I was like, I don't know what the hell that is, or digital marketing, what the hell is that? And data, oh my God, data's the hardest thing still, but it's digital puts you in that kind of going back to the data piece is digital is all things data, right? Like it just makes you focus in on that kind of stuff. When you think of like the digital marketing team at any product company or any team, really, it's about data, and always testing and seeing what works, what doesn't work, what messed up, and all that kind of stuff. Anyways, that's where I kind of learned, that, I've always had to go get, I'm kind of this, just tell me what to go do, kind of stuff. And I've had over time to really be a little bit more strategic rather than these tactical things. I'm good at getting shit done, but it took me a long time, and I still struggle to some degree, with that higher level strategic focus. Because one thing, you tell me to do something, I'll do it, but and that's what that taught me is that slow down, Chris. We're not going to get to the entire year roadmap in 3 months or less. You can't do it. Let's focus on these 3 things. This quarter, and then next quarter we'll work on that other stuff. So hopefully that answers the question, but that's really for me is.
I love your passion and your desire to learn. And that last thing you said reminded me of another Intuit slogan, which maybe you guys have there, is focus on the critical few.
I've heard that. Yes. Yep.
It's another Intuit. You heard that a lot at Intuit.
Yeah, it's something that Chris Hyland, he's our CEO, and he's very. You could tell it's. He did this at Imperva when I was at Imperva, and he actually recruited me to Reltio. But he focuses in on those few that he knows is going to get the job done. I mean, he is. Everything you talked about are all the things that he's implemented in his leadership. And it's quite interesting to hear you talk. Because you were before the Chris Hyland stuff, right? And you're seeing all that stuff. So obviously leadership before him, before he was even there. Kind of had that same philosophy because you have some of that same stuff. So this is really fun. This was crazy weird to me because I hear that same stuff that, so maybe I'll try to recruit you to do something from
Yeah,
dude, you'd fit in, man. It's awesome. So
I think, Intuit also just had, great leaders, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people, it's like, who are you going to go work for? What's the team you're going to be with? You want to work for a leader who's, inspirational, you click with, who you're going to learn something. Steve Bennett was at Intuit. He was good. Brad Smith is a legend. Brad Smith, he was there when I was there. He just left 2 years ago, and now he's basically reviving the economy in West Virginia, and he's the president of Marshall College. Think about how many, very successful Silicon Valley CEOs, who do something like that.
It's crazy. Like if you look at all the leaders that company has produced, it's insane and really cool to hear, another person that is outside of my company talk about the same shit. Oh my God, Scott gets this, he lives my life. Or you're teaching, you're doing the learn, teach, learn stuff, that Intuit kind of put out there, and my CEO does it. Our leadership team for the most part does that, and that thinking is just, it's crazy to see. Like you see it, like the people here at Reltio now, I mean, is just, it's just focus, focus, focus. Yes, it's learn, teach, learn, but it's also, you're getting stuff done. You're making things happen. We know exactly what to do to get this company to the next level. And that, I think, comes from that mindset. So Scott, this has been great. We definitely lived on the wilder side today. For me, anyways, it was really awesome to talk to you.
Well, it's always great to take a walk on the wilder side, Chris, with you. And like I said, we connected a few weeks ago for the first time, and from the bleachers, I really can see your passion and what you're doing with this podcast and your work, and so and you got a great learning mindset, which is like so important. So thank you for inviting me here.
Well, thank you, and well, thanks everyone for another Peers Over Beers. I'm Chris Detzel, and Scott Wilder. Thank you again for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.